Brian, I just renamed it presentation. I'm sure you can see it.
Just got her.
Mr. Martin?
I believe he's in.
I'm here. Couldn't find the mute button.
Is that everyone? Brian, was that it?
I think so. I think that's everybody.
All right, if not, we'll catch it in roll call then. All right, I'd like to call the Wilson School District I'd like to call the July 20th, 2020 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case? Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
Mr. Martin? I'm sorry, I didn't hear Mr. Martin.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. McCray?
Present.
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And I see we have Mr. Hart. That's
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Please stand for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag,
of the United States of America,
United States
To the
of
republic for which it
America,
for which it stands,
to the republic for which it stands,
under God,
one nation,
indivisible,
under
liberty
God,
and justice for all.
indivisible, with liberty and
All right, Mr. Maravich, we're going to, sorry.
No,
I was just gonna say, we'll have you do your announcement and they'll have the communication, which is the presentation. And after that, we'll do the public participation.
So there's 2 opportunities for the public to address the school board. The first is on agenda items, which will be right after this presentation and before the agenda. The second will be on non-agenda items, which is at the end of the meeting. It is a 3-minute opportunity for the public to address the board on matters that may come before or may come before it. It is not question and answer, but is instead an opportunity to provide that comment to the board before their consideration of an issue. And I believe we have 5 on agenda and 1 on non-agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, Dr. Faley, I'll turn it over to you and your team for the presentation of the Wilson School District Health and Safety Plan.
Thank you, President Hart. It's my privilege this evening to present the Wilson School District reopening plan as it stands right now to our public community in our board meeting environment. So if you can move to the next slide, please. We have been on a path as a district team, inclusive of health professionals, teachers, nurses, parents, administrators, and other staff members over the course of the past 6 weeks to put our health and safety plan together for the board to consider this evening. The plan incorporates data from a survey we sent to families on June 22nd, as well as planning guides from numerous state and federal groups, including the PA Department of Education, the CDC, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. First and foremost, our plan is designed to be flexible and provides our district with an opportunity to adjust or shift at any time to meet the needs of our community, to meet the needs of our students, and to meet the needs of our staff. We are considering this plan to be extremely fluid. And as we sit here on July 20th, we understand that things are changing weekly and sometimes daily with direction that we get from the CDC, from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the governor's office. So we do understand that there is a likelihood that we will be back in front of the board, communicating potential modifications to this plan over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks. But it's extremely important, I believe, that we get information out to our community so our community can start planning. We have developed a robust, flexible plan that is designed to meet the needs of families, regardless of if their intent is to send their children back to school full time, to send their students into a virtual environment. We have created those opportunities for our community members and for our students. This time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Trickett to really go through some more specifics. We will be sharing responsibilities this evening. Dr. Stout will present the elementary components. Dr. Trickett will present the middle school and secondary components. Dr. Hoffert will present the overall subcommittee work and some of our guiding principles as we move forward with this plan. So thank you again for the opportunity to present this plan to you publicly.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. Before I dive into the timeline overview, I just want to take the opportunity. I see we have about 130 of our community members, parents, students, and teachers on the call. And I want to preface the next 40 minutes here kind of through the lens of the need for this to be a collaborative effort, a true partnership. A lot of what we're going to talk through here is really our best current thinking based on all the expertise and insight we've received. But in order for this plan to be able to put into action, we're really asking for the support and help of our community to help in any areas outside of our school district to minimize the spread of COVID-19. And we're going to talk about some of those ways today on how we can do that as a school district. And those ways could be applied to our everyday life as well. So the timeline of where we are today and kind of how we got here. If you remember, back when we closed our doors in March, there was a lot of uncertainty with regard to what the summer would look like, and I think a lot of a sense of hope with a lot of people that we would get back to normal as we started the new school year in August of this coming year here. And the governor took a step in that direction when he stated and told the local school districts across this Commonwealth that we can reopen as long as we have an approved health and safety plan. So we got that information in early June. And since that day, we have been working diligently, trying to include as many representative groups throughout our community to develop a plan that we feel is appropriate, is in line with the safety recommendations that we received, and inclusive of a lot of different stakeholders' feedback. So that work began in mid-June. We decided pretty early on that we were going to have a structure of a task force, a larger task force, which again was representative of teachers and nurses and specialists, principals, community members, different staff members from across our organization, to start to unpack and dive deeply into what this health and safety plan is and the 4 tenets that made up the plan. From that task force meeting, it was determined that we would need to develop committees that would be facilitated by task force members, because this work was just so large that we needed to distribute out the leadership and the work that was going into the recommendations to implement the plan that you're going to see this evening. Part of that work is to gain feedback from our community, and we were very thankful to have over 4,000 people participate in a community and staff survey, which really helped guide our thinking about 3 weeks ago. Questions along the lines of, would you send your child back to school if we could meet the criteria set by the Department of Health and the CDC? Would you be interested in using transportation? As well as some feedback pieces on our virtual programming. So we've been using that data to drive and inform all the decisions and recommendations that we'll be presenting this evening. We engaged our leadership teams. We engaged our principals, our supervisors, worked with local superintendents, worked with superintendents from across the country to get an idea of what they were doing. However, on July 7th, on the bottom of the left side of our screen was one of the most important and impactful days that we had in our plan to date. And that's the date where we engaged in receiving feedback and guidance from local medical professionals, people who are experts in this space, people who research and stay current with the facts, the science behind this virus, how it spreads, and how we can support those people who become ill here in Berks County. Everything that we read from the Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control states that we need to go back to our local medical groups. So again, I can't reinforce enough to the families that are on today and to our board members that we are very fortunate in this community to have a community made up of wonderful people from the variety of different backgrounds. And this is one of those times where we needed to rely on that community to guide us. And they gave us very specific feedback. They told us some things that we didn't know. They expanded our knowledge in some areas that we had read. And that work is all throughout our plan. We spoke with members from that team as recently as 3 o'clock this afternoon, as they continue to give us feedback based off of what they're seeing in the hospital, what they're reading about the local trends, and it just cannot overstate the value that they've added to our group. On July 15th, we had the opportunity to meet with a parent group that was representative of all of our different schools. And we were going in a slightly different direction, candidly, a day prior. And because of some of the feedback we received, and because of where things shifted across our region, we modified our recommendation. And we presented this to our parent group, our focus group, on July 15th. And they had the opportunity to give us feedback, to ask probing questions, and really, again, serve as a partner to guide the work that we're doing. Not so much a Q&A, but more of just a feedback loop for us as a team. We then had the opportunity to meet with our professional staff members on July 17th, and we presented the plan in its current state to them last Friday. All along modifying, tweaking the plan that's on the board agenda this evening, which is the July 20th board date. And just a reminder that this plan is still tentative, it's very fluid. And we do expect to come back to our community and our board in the coming weeks with adjustments as this continues to change. There will be a communication going out to our community tomorrow, as well as our staff, informing them of this plan. And we're also recording this presentation, and we'll be posting this on the website for our entire community to have access to. Later this week, there will be a questionnaire where we'll be asking our parents to softly commit to what their plans are for next year. Again, I go back to the partnership. We need to know where parents are in their thinking, and there will be choice. That will help us build our schedules and help us maximize the staff that we have in our school buildings. Some of the overarching beliefs about our reopening plan, again, informed by our different community groups. We want to make sure that student and staff and community safety drives our decisions. We need to make sure that our plan is flexible and allows us to adapt as seamlessly as possible as conditions warrant, which is not easy. This is a novel virus. We don't have all of the facts, but we do know that our plan just needs to provide us with the flexibility to shift at a moment's notice. We know that no matter what happens throughout the year, that we need to be able to provide our students with a robust educational experience. And we know that that experience can't look the way it looked in March, April, and May. And we recognize that that was an emergency learning environment that we were in. And we're committed to ensuring that the program is much stronger. And it's also our goal, as bolded there, to be in school as long as possible, which means that we need to take additional precautions early to allow that to occur, to give us a shot at being in school with our kids and our teachers as long as we as safely can be. So some specific factors that we were considering, or that we are considering, the current planning process is for all students to receive some form of face-to-face instruction. And we're going to talk about that as this presentation progresses. The determining factors that we're going to use throughout the year is really the virus transmission within our region, within our local zip codes, within our schools, and we're continually being in contact with our local medical professionals as they really are the people who are guiding us on the safety protocols. And that's, again, the key component is that constant and frequent communication. We also know that we need to maximize social distancing throughout all of our schools in any way possible. And we're going to do that by modifying schedules. We're going to be very creative. We're going to try to reduce the number of students in some of our spaces. We're going to reduce the chance wherever we can that this virus can be transmitted. And we're going to limit potential exposure in all of the spaces. And this could look like reduced capacity on our buses, reduced capacity in our classrooms, in any large group spaces, reduced and structured movements throughout our buildings, things that we're not used to, but things that we truly believe are necessary to reopen our school buildings. Also, along with this or parallel to this planning, we are working on finalizing a comprehensive plan for fully remote learning for our families. We know that some families, regardless of our plan, are going to choose to keep their child in a virtual option. We understand that and we respect that. However, we also believe that our programs taught by our teachers are what's best for our students. So that is the program that we are developing with our teachers, with our staff. And this academy or this program will be a combination of live instruction, recorded instruction, learning activities, collaborative experiences. It will mirror exactly the Wilson School District's regular instructional program, which is very, very important. It will not look like an outside provider program where it's different. It'll be the same program that we're utilizing within our schools. And we also understand that parents might need to move in and out of this, but we're hopeful that parents also understand that we need some form of a commitment. And we're looking at asking parents to commit to maybe a marking period at a time, maybe a trimester in the elementary schools, to allow us to really customize and build our program so that it's beneficial for our kids and realistic for our staff members to roll out to our families. So some of the initial pieces, some of the high level pieces that Andy, Dr. Hofford will be discussing. Again, as a reminder, the plan is fluid. You're going to continue to hear that. It just really serves as our guardrails that help us keep our planning moving down the road. We can't become so distracted that we're paralyzed by this pandemic, and this plan will help keep us focused on our goal and where we need to go over the next 5 weeks. At the direction of the governor, the Secretary of Health, and our local medical experts, a big piece of our plan will be requiring all students and staff to wear face coverings. And this is, I know it's a strong statement, but it will be a requirement. And we will work with families. We will help educate families and educate our children on the proper ways to do this. But will be a firm expectation, because we believe through everything that we've read and everything we've been taught that the mask is one of the biggest pieces that we're in control over in slowing the spread of COVID throughout our community. So we want to make sure our families understand that will be an expectation. We're going to obviously have to worry about our transportation system. And part of that survey questionnaire that you're going to receive as a family member next week will speak to this. We need to use our buses at a lower capacity. And we're going to ask our families if they can get their children to work, or to school rather, to partner with us in doing so. That will allow us to transport those children who are not able to get here through other means. We're looking at creative ways to run the buses and to have family members sit together on buses where possible. Another key part to our plan is going to be the screening of COVID symptoms with our staff members and our students on a daily basis. And Dr. Hoffert will go into this in detail, but we're also going to ask our families and recommend that our families pre-screen students prior to coming to school. So it's a double, kind of a double line of defense to ensure not only your child's safety, but also the safety of everyone in our school buildings. And we're confident that our families will do that with us. There's going to be specific protocols hopefully released by medical professionals, the CDC and or the Department of Health in the next few days or coming weeks, with the protocols regarding sequestering students or staff who may be exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. And we will be working with our team of nurses to make sure that we implement them with fidelity. There will be additional precautions anywhere possible with regards to increase in social distancing in classrooms, reduction of class sizes, common spaces. All of those things are being discussed. And then protocols, procedures, and education for our kids and our staff with regard to hygiene practices. We're a school. The core tenet of what we do is educate children and families, and that can't be lost in this work that we're doing. And we believe it's essential not only to train and to teach our kids, but to provide time in the day for them to ensure that they're following through with these practices. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Andy Hoffert, who will be reviewing with everyone our health and safety plan.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Yeah, as you can see, the health and safety plan is broken down into 4 areas for consideration. And I'll go through kind of a summary of each one of these areas and provide a little bit more detail about what all went into the discussion of those parts of the plan. It's important to know that as part of the planning process, the state asked us to not only complete the template as we intend to open school, but also to consider a more restrictive environment as well. So in the full plan itself, you'll see a column of recommendations for what we're considering to be a green environment, a green status for our area, and then also a column for yellow that indicates some additional changes that might be a little more restrictive. Most of the things, or not, if not all of the things that we'll be talking about tonight, are things that fall within that green column. And then, if we come to a situation where we do need to be a little bit more restrictive with our plan, we can always shift over to that yellow version or that yellow column that we're calling it, which will create some built-in flexibility for our team to make that determination based on the local conditions and local recommendations. So again, the 4 areas that we'll be discussing as kind of our overall guide rails, as we're calling them, are the cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation, social distancing and other safety protocols. That's the big category where we talk about what our student experience is going to be like within the building. Monitoring student and staff health. Dr. Trickett just mentioned earlier about pre-screening and screening students on the way into the building. I'll talk more about what that looks like. And then just some other considerations for staff and students in order to keep them safe as they move throughout the buildings. So in the first section, again, this is just a summary statement that's taken right out of the report, but our goal is to increase the frequency of our cleaning routines, to increase the number of, or the times that we do deep cleaning within some of our common areas at our restrooms. We're going to be having custodial staff moving through the buildings on a frequent basis, ongoing throughout the school day, wiping down high-touch areas. Our district vehicles, our kitchen areas will be undergoing increased cleaning and sanitization routines. We're going to be working with our facilities staff to try and increase our airflow with our HVAC systems and increase the rate at which we change our filters out. Our facilities team has actually already begun working to bring in some additional supplies and equipment in order to make this possible. They've already begun training on cleaning practices that are approved for COVID-19 and responding to that virus. And we continue to develop our procedures in this area to ensure that our buildings are as clean as possible throughout the day, and that we're disinfecting as much as possible throughout the day and afterwards. So our custodial staff schedules may be adjusted to ensure that we have the staffing needed in our buildings at all times to accomplish this. When it comes to social distancing and some of the other safety protocols, again, this is where we begin to discuss what our student day looks like. And a large part of this is trying to reduce the number of students in our buildings at any one time, and to help them continue to maintain that social or physical distancing within the classrooms. Dr. Stout and Dr. Trickett are going to talk in more detail about what that might look like at both the elementary and the secondary level. But it includes trying to reduce class sizes as much as possible, reduce transitions between classes, provide more of a cohort model so that students, if they are moving together and staying together as a group rather than intermingling between classes. At the secondary level, looking at ways to reduce the total census, the number of students in our building at any one time. And we'll talk more about what a full schedule plan might look like between the elementary and the secondary. And I can tell you at the elementary level, we're looking at the option of bringing back students in grades K through 6. And again, Dr. Stout and Dr. Trickett will talk more about that. But what does that look like, bringing back all of those students into our buildings? How are we reducing class sizes, reducing transitions, as I mentioned, and ensuring that our students are able to maintain physical distancing in our buildings? And we've done a lot of work to see if that's even feasible. At the secondary level, we are looking at a modified schedule, a hybrid model, where we would reduce the number of students in our secondary buildings, grades 7 through 12, in half in order to provide lower class sizes, vastly reduced class sizes, and also to provide fewer students in our physical environments in our large spaces in order to accommodate that social distancing. And again, Dr. Trickett will go into more detail about what that looks like in those areas. Transportation, again, trying to reduce the number of students and the number of students we're transporting throughout the day. And again, through all these options, you'll see over and over again that we are intent on providing a full virtual option, a robust virtual option for any of our students who self-select that and require that type of instruction going forward. When it comes to monitoring student and staff health, our nursing team has been working on creating some additional protocols and practices that they can utilize throughout the school day when it comes to trying to isolate students, protecting not only the students who could be infected that we find during the school day, but then also pre-screening students upon arrival. So we're going to be working with our families, pushing out some information about symptoms to look for, how to screen for a temperature, and the conditions under which they should probably keep a student home. At the same time, when students arrive for the school day, our plan is to be screening them for temperature. We have some thermal cameras we'll be using at all the building levels, in addition to some handheld touchless thermometers and our additional nursing staff for arrival, where we'll be able to screen students on their way in, and then isolate students who may be exhibiting a higher temperature to do some additional screening and to determine if that's a student who might need to be sent home. So we are working very closely with the Department of Health and waiting for some additional guidelines for CDC when it comes to protocols regarding return to school and what to do in the situation of a student who is found to be positive or may have had exposure. And those protocols will be put in place, again, as soon as we receive some specific guidance from those agencies. And again, our nurses have been working directly with us in addition to our consultants from the local medical community to expand upon some of these practices and procedures that are in much more detail in the full report. And the final section of the plan really highlights just what they're calling some other considerations, but really it talks about this requirement for masking. What we've heard over and over again is that the number one thing that's going to help reduce the spread of the disease is for everyone, students and staff, to be wearing face coverings as much as possible throughout the day. Again, Dr. Stout and Dr. Trickett will go into more specifics about what that might look like in the classroom environment. And of course, we understand that younger students are going to have much more difficulty with that throughout the day than older students. We have students who have medical concerns that we'll have to take into consideration and communicate with families about. But we can't stress enough how important our medical community has stressed that masking is one of the most important things that we can do in order to prevent the spread of the disease. Again, I'll reiterate again, our full virtual option will be available for any families who select that as their option. And we're working to finalize a plan to make that as robust and meaningful as possible for our students. Our next steps as a group are really to break out into a network of subcommittees. And as I mentioned before, this is really just the plan we're working on tonight is really just the starting point. It's the guardrails that all of our subcommittees will be using to guide their work and to guide their roadmap of questions that they have that they're working through. You can see there are a list of subcommittees that are headed by some different leadership in our district. And each of these subcommittees include members from our teaching, faculty, administrative staff. And they're working through basically the nuts and bolts. What does this look like? How is this going to be implemented on a practical level when we come to our buildings in the fall? And that's work that will continue to change and progress as we get closer and closer to the start of school year. So the work really has just begun. The plan that we're bringing forward tonight, like I said, is our starting point, but it's going to be kind of foundational in the work that the rest of our subcommittees are doing. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stout to talk about the elementary experience.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hoffert. As you've heard multiple times now, this health and safety plan really is the framework or the guide rails that we will be driving between. Please know that in order to achieve a comprehensive implementation of our plans to reopen, we are going to engage those subcommittee members as well as our professional staff, as well as our leadership, members of our community. So we do have many more decisions to make about the logistics and the implementation pieces. And we know there's a tremendous complexity to all of that. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is a presumptive green phase of what elementary will look like if we're returning to school in green at the beginning of this year. So all kindergarten through 6th grade students are going to attend school face-to-face with this particular plan. Students in K through 5 will be beginning the year in a staggered model. And what that means is very much like our kindergartners have done for several years now, each of the grade levels K through 5 will be approaching the start of the year in a 1/3 sized group. So 1/3 will start on the first day, 1/3 of students will start on the second day, 1/3 of students will start on the third day, and then on the fourth day, all students will join their rostered classmates. And the reason we chose to do this is because we believe that it's very important that we take into consideration what we know about trauma-informed practice in education. And we know that this has been a really traumatic time for families and for children. And so when we're thinking about the emotional wellness of our kids, we want to make sure that we're addressing those needs and perhaps relationship building needs in a small group format. So we're thinking about this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 as a way to really reduce the size of the group that will be introduced to this new model of education for the first few days of school prior to rejoining their entire rostered class. That will give teachers time to help them learn procedures and protocols, safety processes, as well as for teachers to get a handle on where these children are emotionally with their reentry to school. We may be looking at some variation in start and end times somewhat so that we can make that accommodation to run our buses at 50% capacity. So we'll be talking about how we could potentially adjust in some ways to provide that ability with our busing. We're looking to reduce class sizes so that we can ensure proper social distancing. We want to minimize the number of students and have them in a cohort model across the day to reduce this cross contact with other students and the commingling. So what we're thinking about is having a classroom of a maximum of 22 students. And if you take a look at this next slide with some photographs, I was able to actually go in and set up a classroom so that you can see one of our smaller classrooms, and this is a grade level classroom, not a supplemental instruction classroom, a grade level classroom where the desks were able to be social distanced and follow all the guidelines of this physical distancing and the other recommendations that have come from the Department of Health and the CDC and our local health professionals. In this model, we're able to accommodate 22 desks for students. We would like to reduce that number even more so if we're able, and that's going to depend upon the results and the data that comes back from our questionnaire, asking our families what their intentions are. Will they be sending students back for in-person instruction, or will they be choosing the in-person, or online virtual option? So once we have that data, we'll know some more about our class sizes, but you can notice here there is distancing space for the teacher to operate at the front of the classroom. And the next slide also shows you both a schematic with the actual measurements, as well as the distancing indicated by the tape measure from mid-desk to mid-desk is a minimum 6 feet. And then we know that students sit behind the desk, so that gives us an additional space for which we can achieve that physical distancing option. And then some of the other pieces you've heard mentioned many times, we'll be asking students to wear masks across the school day, as well as our staff members. We do know that there is developmental appropriateness to be taken into consideration here. What masking looks like in kindergarten will be vastly different than what it would look like in the upper elementary grades. We intend to have students be able to take breaks when they're able to be social distanced. So times that they're sitting at their desk, or when they are at least 6 feet apart from other students, they will be able to remove their masks for a period of time. However, based on recommendations from our local professional physicians, masks will be worn for any transition. So if students leave their desks, they're using the bathroom, traveling in the hallways, and so on, we will be asking them to be masking at that particular time. They're also going to be participating in those hygiene routines. They'll be washing hands across the day multiple times, especially when they're eating snack or eating lunch, using the bathroom. We are in conversation with our nurses about the appropriateness of the students being able to potentially use a Clorox wipe to clean up their personal learning spaces, particularly after eating. We know that according to this particular plan, students will likely receive their meals in the classroom. We don't believe that the social distancing options in the cafeteria are adequate. And so we want to make sure that, again, students remain with their cohort. In addition to that, mealtime, students will have recesses twice a day, and we'll try to optimize the use of outdoor space when the weather permits, so that they can get a lot of activity and breathe the fresh, clean air. And just please rest assured that students will also have access to a full program in-person instruction, which includes the core content areas they've always experienced in school, as well as access to their special classes like art, PE, discovery, library, and music, even if those are modified a little bit and we have potential opportunities for maybe specialists to come to students. So these are the plans that we have in place for now. Keep in mind, this is the plan if we're looking at entry and reopening within the green phase. We are in the development of a potential hybrid model for elementary school, but again, many complexities to a hybrid with younger children. And then of course, also finalizing some plans for the fully online virtual model of education. So should the governor or the Department of Health make a statement that our schools are closed, and that would need to be an option for all students. So at this time, we're ready to hear from Dr. Trickett to continue on the conversation about middle school and high school.
Thank you. As Dr. Stout said, there are unique challenges with our younger children when you look at different options for learning programs. Couple that with the data that we received and the guidance from the medical team around the ability or the probability that younger children contract the virus and are able to spread the virus. We have made a recommendation to our board tonight and to our community to keep our 6th grade students in the same model as our K-5 students. Obviously, it would have been easy to just cut the line at the 5th grade mark because that's where our schools end. But again, based on the age of the children that we have in 6th grade and the ability to spread students out and to reduce class sizes, that will maximize social distancing, and our ability to cohort students together, just like they do in an elementary school, we feel comfortable that we can propose the same model for our 6th grade students. So again, for the middle school parents that are out there, the way that this would look different from a regular middle school schedule is that the group that your child is with in first period, if let's call that English, would be the same group that that child would be with throughout the school day. They will go to their different classes. They transition of students throughout the building. If that's something that our team feels is capable of producing and doing safely, would be done with that cohort group. They would be done on an alternating bell schedule so that they would be the only students in the hall at that time. Again, this meets our criteria or goals of social distancing, reducing our class sizes, and reducing the cross contact wherever possible. Lots of things to work out with our food service, and you see that we have an entire committee dedicating to food service. Our new director of food service is very capable and is working with a great team to developing our plans, because this is a moving target based on where the guidelines are with the size of the gatherings that we're permitted to have. That second bullet point will change. We're also looking at creating schedules for recess. Having access to the same specials that any 6th grade child would have, and being outside as much as we possibly can, giving students the opportunity just to be outside with their peers and to get those masks off wherever possible. We're also looking at the secondary level at adjusting start and end times, possibly to the school day. Part of this is with busing, but part of this is with our ability to onboard kids into our school setting. We have a lot of students in our secondary buildings, and as we all know from parent drop-off, sometimes that can be a hectic time. So if we can reduce that, or if we can come up with a system to make that easier for our teams to manage, we think that this is the best time to do that. So more information will be coming as our committees finalize their work. In our 7th to 12th grade school setting, we have a lot of challenges. And for those that are on the call here, the best way I can describe a secondary schedule is to liken it to a college schedule, where you go into your first class on a Monday and you're with a certain group of students. It might be 30 students here at the high school. You may not see any of those students the rest of your day in all of the other classes, even though they're in 9th grade with you. Our schedules are exceptionally personalized, and we pride ourselves as a team in the high school of really being able to deliver on student choice. That is very hard to do with 2,100 kids in a building. And we've wrestled with this. We've gone back and forth with our secondary model. And our best thinking right now in secondary is to try to reduce the number of kids in our classes in our school by half. That's it, a number that we feel is manageable. It's a number that we feel that we can deliver on all of those target areas that we discussed previously. And the way that we're looking at doing this in the middle school in grades 7 and 8 is to utilize that teaming approach. Take that concept of teaming and build it again as a cohort model, where those kids would stay with their peer group in period 1 as much as possible throughout the day, limiting transitions, limiting the number of children in the hallways to the greatest extent possible to reduce the amount of students that they come in contact with. Also, by reducing half of our population by using an A-B rotation, which I will explain to you, we'll have about half of the kids on any given day in school. So in a class of 32 kids, that would be a very large class in our high school. The most that we would have in that building, in that classroom, is 16, plus a teacher, possibly additional aid, a support person in there for the kids, which keeps us within our guidelines for social distancing. Obviously, this will minimize and reduce the number of students and faculty in our hall at any given time, which will allow us to create some additional protocols to actually work on the flow of children and students throughout our school buildings. Again, you see the same bullet point there with regards to cafeterias and meals and coming up with appropriate places for students to eat. Flexibility is going to be key. As we get to our older level students in our school, we can be very flexible with those students. More often than not, they meet our expectations and prove that they can handle more responsibility. So this will be a year where we'll be putting some more responsibility on them and giving them some additional freedom to allow us to even open our school further. And some of our senior parents that are on now already received a survey about some options that you would have. None of those pieces are required, but we are recommending to loosen up some of our graduation requirements to allow our senior students a little bit more flexibility in their day. The next slide talks and shows visually what the AB rotation would look like. So for sake of this conversation, Group A under face-to-face on Monday would be half of our students in secondary grades 12 or 7 to 12. So half of our students would come to school as they normally do, ride the bus, walk to school, get dropped off, or drive in their car to the high school. While the other half of students are at home, participating in learning in their home environment, not in school in this particular model. On Tuesday, those two groups simply just switch. So Group B that was doing their remote learning is now in school face-to-face with their peers and their teacher. And Group A is at home. The way we've described this type of a learning is a chunk. It's a 2-day lesson plan. And we have full confidence in our professional educators that they can design meaningful and impactful learning experiences for kids during both of those days, whether they're here face-to-face or whether they're home working collaboratively with their peers. I'm going to skip Wednesday and I'm going to jump to Thursday and Friday. Thursday and Friday you see is the exact same model as Monday and Tuesday. So Group A is on Thursday, Group B is on Friday. So again, Group A would be in school face-to-face on Monday and Thursday. Group B would be in school on Tuesday and Friday. On Wednesday, we're proposing a live synchronous learning environment where all students will be home. And there's some caveats to the all students, but students would be at home. They would be participating in live synchronous learning experiences, similar to what we're doing right now. The teacher would be teaching, students would be going into breakout rooms, collaborating, working on content, working on learning activities. The teacher would be checking progress from the day before, again, in that live setting. This would be an opportunity for all 32 of those kids to participate as a class, to build that sense of community that will be a challenge in a hybrid model. This also gives us the opportunity to do some additional deep cleaning, to do some additional safety protocols within our building with a reduced student count in our schools on that midday, in the midday of the week. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions to that. We're looking and working with our special education teachers, our supervisors, and our team of principals to identify students who would benefit from a 5-day-a-week model. And we are preparing to release those recommendations where we can to make sure that we're meeting the specific needs that each child has with their learning goals. Also, we understand that our families, depending on how we decide to break up this AB structure, that we could possibly split some families up. And we are committed to keeping family members who live in the same household together wherever that is recommended. If families would request that, we are committing to coming up with a plan to ensure that can happen for childcare, for just ease of the family unit at home. So again, just a little bit of the reminders or a recap from this presentation. I know it was a lot of information. We want to just draw attention back on the fact that we want to be able to provide in-person instruction full-time to our students. That's our plan. That's our desire, and that's what we're trying to do. We believe in working with our team that starting in a blended or hybrid option at the middle school and high school and small classes in the elementary level will set us up for success and allow us to ensure that we can keep this system going as long as possible. While this is happening, we'll be monitoring the community spread. We'll be monitoring what's going on, in our local medical facilities. We'll be evaluating our plan constantly through this process, and obviously taking the guidance from the governor and the Department of Health. If we move into yellow, if we move into red, some of these things may be out of our control, but that is our commitment to our community throughout this process. We designed it to be flexible. We designed it to be fluid. And we also designed it to allow our students and our staff to move in and out of the different modes of instruction that we have to the greatest extent possible. We're committed to continuing to collaborate with our local health providers and to stay up to date on all of the current information and best practices that we have, what other school districts around the nation are doing to respond to the situation that we're in, and also just to communicate with you as a community, as a board, frequently. Ongoing communication is going to help get us through this, and the partnership that we've referred to many times throughout this presentation. So thank you very much. And this concludes our formal presentation. I will throw it back over to Dr. Faley to wrap up.
Thank you, team. As you've heard this evening, the premise of our plan is to ensure the safety of our students and staff to the maximum extent possible. It's also to keep our students in school, in front of the teachers that make a difference in their lives to the maximum extent possible, and for the longest period of time that we can, in the event that the numbers and the virus escalates once again, and we are given directives from the state government on limitations that we can provide within our schools. I was participating in a national group discussion with a group of superintendents in an organization called Transformational Leadership. And what became very clear to me is that everyone across the United States is struggling with the same issues. How do you appropriately physically distance students? How do you ensure that our schools are clean? How do we ensure that we are prepared to provide parents with opportunities to have choice in their child's education? And I believe that the plan that we are proposing this evening hits on all of those pieces and is very consistent with some of the highest performing school systems in the nation. I will also add that in my conversation with the 17 other superintendents, the county commissioners, multiple legislators at the state level, all of us are focused on the same thing: to mitigate the spread of this virus, to keep people safe, and to do so in a way that makes logical sense. Again, giving people flexibility and choice in what they do for their own families. So with that said, I conclude our presentation. I thank my team, the professional staff, the Wilson Education Association, our parents, our medical consultants, our school nurses, the entire team of individuals that's been working on this plan for the better part of 6 weeks to present this information to you tonight. There's much more work to be done in those subcommittees. And I'm very proud of our school district. I feel very blessed to lead this organization because we are doing what's right for students, we are doing what's right for staff, and we are doing what's right for our community. And we are listening to the voices and providing an inclusive environment for individuals to provide input into our plan. And we will continue to do so. So thank you very much, President Hart, for the opportunity to share our presentation this evening. That concludes this portion of our agenda.
Great, thank you. A big thank you to Dr. Faley and your whole team that has been working over the past 6 weeks to put this together in this environment that's continually changing. So at this point, I would like to open up the board members who may have questions or comments. Feel free to speak out like we do whenever, say your name and we'll go from there. So board members, I'll turn it over to you.
Can you hear me?
Not real well.
Okay, I'm gonna call in on my phone.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You might have to mute your computer, but we do hear
Yep,
you different
yep.
on the phone.
Yep,
Go
yep.
ahead, Mr. Martin.
Okay.
I have a preamble first before I get into major discussion items. The widespread misunderstanding of COVID due to the media and misinformation has forced individuals to make sacrifices and to make mom and own choices. Do you believe the media? Do you believe the governor? Do you believe in science? Do you believe the CDC? The problem is all this information and lack of understanding threatens people's rights, the basic fabrics of democracy, civility, truth, and facts. Science and reasoning are paramount in the battle of educating people on all this information. Partial truths, selected experts with own agendas, and organizations that push their agendas way too often. In addition, there's way too much partisanship and economic interest that only adds to the raw confusion of COVID-19. As an auditor for many years, I've based my decisions on relevant data. I do not listen to media hype. I do not listen to experts because there's thousands of them with their own opinions. The governor has his own agenda, and various health agencies always conflict with each other. So what do we do? Science and the science statistics is a key factor in any decision. Per the CDC, the fatality rate of COVID-19 is less than 0.65%, which is less than the common flu that has killed many people in the past. In addition, other organizations peg the fatality rate to be by 0.2%. This is far greater difference than the 3, 5, 10% that's put in the media. And this that's unfortunate because that was not considered in any of the plans. A second point per the CDC is that over 40 million Americans have already been impacted by the COVID. Yet that's not considered. A third point is 40% of everybody that's in our community will be immune to it from the standpoint they have no symptoms. Others will show some symptoms from a sore throat to loss of taste, to headaches, to coughing, to various other ends, while some individuals will only show one. Per the CDC, screening people is at best 50% effective and does not prevent the disease from spreading. The problem here is we have a runaway train and no one wants to stop from fear of being criticized. Now, with that said, I do have a bone of contention with the superintendent. I asked to be on the committee. As a board member, I have that right. And was denied that opportunity to be on the committee. The committee was composed of Wilson district employees, as well as several community in the health field. And while I do not, I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect for any of the health professionals, but having a committee comprised of those individuals, to me, lacks diversity and other opinions that might exist. Now, with that said, here's my issues with the plan. First of all, I agree about 80% of it, but I disagree with the screening. I think that violates a parent's rights and a student's rights. I believe teachers should have the option of not wearing a mask. I believe the committee needs to have at least 3 board members on it. Excuse me. And finally, I'm in favor of a total reopening of the schools. And I realize that based on the presentation, there's concerns about social distancing. But I believe it's in the best interest to have everyone back. And a couple other minor things. When students have study halls, where do they go between periods? And some curriculum, such as technical education, I don't believe can be done correctly at home. So being in school only 1 or 2 days, I believe needs to be maybe adjusted to include maybe on a Wednesday. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. What other questions or concerns do we have from the board?
My biggest concern is, oh, am I echoing too?
Yes.
I'm alone. I don't know why I'm
I
echoing.
think you're okay now. You're
That was
okay.
coming
now.
through
You should be, yeah, I had to mute Mike because it was echoing through.
Okay.
Go
My
ahead, Dr.
biggest
Kennedy.
concern, ironically, is the same concern I've had since the 1997-98 school year when I first became a Wilson school teacher. My very first Wilson class had 29 students in it. My last class, 13 years later, had 28 students in it. My son Cooper's class consistently had 27 or 28 students his entire time at Green Valley. And my third son's class has 29 students in it. And this has been something we've been struggling for 23 years. And it's something that the district has either been unwilling or unable to even look at. I've complained to former superintendents. I've complained to my former principal, Mr. Hart. I've complained to Dr. Stout when she was the principal of my son's school. And I just am very wary because I don't think 22 is a small class size. I mean, pedagogically speaking, a kindergarten class should be under 18. I don't see how you're going to open up the closets in that classroom that you put 22 desks in. They're literally up against the closets in that room. I don't consider 22 a small class, especially considering the teacher's going to have to be looking around, looking for masks, looking to make sure kids aren't out of their seats. The classroom management alone is going to be totally amped up because you're going to have kids that are, I mean, if we've all seen it on Facebook and it's really accurate, all the teachers that are saying, show this is what it's like to have a child wear a mask. I couldn't even, my kids, first graders would come in with wiggly teeth. It was almost impossible to teach a child with a wiggly tooth. And I can't imagine teaching 22 of them with a mask on. So I'm not advocating for not having masks. I'm advocating for lessening the teacher's classroom management difficulties and lowering that class size even more. I honestly don't care if you park trailers in the parking lots of every single school. I don't care if look at Shiloh Hills, you could make that a forest school. Look at the beautiful land we have around Shiloh Hills. You really could be really thinking creatively and think out of the box. But that class size in my mind has to be much, much, much lower. And the other concern I have is parents and teachers both being encouraged to quarantine if they have any symptoms at all, and also if they've been to one of the states where the cases are rising. So we might have teachers that are going to on vacation the week before school starts, which is, you know, a great idea. It's a nice break right before you get started teaching. But are those teachers going to be encouraged by the district to quarantine for the full 14 days? If you have families who are in North Carolina the third week in August, are they going to be encouraged to quarantine for 14 days, as is the mandate from the governor? I think, you know, it makes me nervous because I understand what it's like to not have, you know, to be a young teacher and to not have a whole lot of sick days. But I think that for the safety of all of our students, that we have to, as a district, really push that quarantining. So those are the two biggest things I have on my plate right now. And I'm really worried about that class size. And I'm worried about what happens when 5, 6, 7 kids move into the school district in October. Where do you put them if there's no room?
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Other concerns or points?
I would like to echo Dr. Kennedy's concern about the class size in elementary schools. Our current situation, we opened Berkshire Heights in the beginning of July, and their class sizes are about 10 per class. And our high school classes would be about no more than 16 per class, depending on if students decide to go virtual or take the hybrid approach. And the fact that we would have students in our elementary schools where behavior and trauma and the SEL concerns are even more heightened than high school, I think it would be doing a disservice to those classrooms to have anywhere close to 20. If we are having our high school and middle school grades at half capacity, I think it makes sense also to have our elementary schools at half capacity. And I understand that there's a childcare aspect to this when it comes to families and the days that the students are in school or they're home virtual for virtual learning, that they'd have to have some sort of coverage. But if we have full capacity at the elementary schools starting school, there's going to become a point where we're going to have to go back home anyways for virtual. So my point in that is, if we start like a scaffolding approach, if we start with what Dr. Stout had mentioned with the, like we do with kindergarten, having a third each day, and do that for maybe more than just the first week. And then as we get, see that the numbers are working and that cases aren't rising, then we go into half capacity at the elementary schools. And when we see that that is also working, then we go to full capacity at the elementary schools. I think it's important that families understand that if we start full on and they aren't taking into consideration that there's a possibility that we would have to go either half capacity or back to full virtual, that childcare aspect of it is not going to be factored in. So I think that could be a false sense of security, that we're there full schedule and that, you know, there are no childcare concerns and whatever they did last year, they're going to do this year. But I think that that's doing a disservice to our families, setting them up that way.
Thank you, Mrs. Cocker. Other board members?
Excuse me, I'd like to make a statement, and then I also would address my one concern. The statement I'd like to make first is that while there are things in this plan that many of us are concerned with, I certainly have some concerns myself. I think it's much more difficult to continue to start from scratch until we get a plan that we find perfect. Please remember that this plan was identified as tentative and fluid, and I think we have to recognize that. And I think there are some very good things in here from which we can build on. That being said, I'll also address an elementary concern, and that's with students being in their little bubbles, as it were, for the majority of the day, and not moving on to their specials. And I understand the rationale for it, but we're, in addition to the 2 recesses they get, I think there needs to be more mask breaks in there. And also at the secondary level, the kids are going to need to get outside, get a chance to get that mask off. Just I think it would ease a lot of concerns that a lot of people have if they were able to do that. And it also gets the kids moving around. We all know how much energy kids have. And if you bottle it up, it could explode when they get home. So.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Other board members?
I had a concern, or actually more of a point of clarification around the middle schools. I have a rising sixth grader, and she didn't get much of a transition last year to the middle school. So my point of clarification is, I noticed that the K to 6 was put together. I'm assuming that is in terms of curriculum, but in terms of the building, will the sixth graders still be sharing the building with the 7th and 8th graders? And so that was my point of clarification. It wasn't really clear from the presentation. And if so, how will that play out if the 7th through 12th sort of days are different than the sixth graders? So I was a little confused in terms of what's going on with sixth graders, specifically where they're going to be, and if their day is going to resemble the elementary, the K to 5 grades, where they're going to be with the same cohort all day as well. I also had concerns similar to Dr. Kennedy's in terms of the space in the classroom. Kids come with lots of stuff, backpacks, lunch boxes if they decide to pack a lunch. I'm just wondering, from the images that were shown, it didn't look like there was a lot of wiggle room for space for that kind of stuff. Also, in terms of protective equipment, I know some families may not be able to have masks on hand for their children. Will the district be providing equipment, not only for the children, but also for our teachers, in terms of making sure that teachers feel that they have enough equipment to protect themselves as well? I think that was major things that I had. Otherwise, I realized that this plan is going to be potentially changing, and that we are considering as if we were in the green phase, or if we're going to be continuing to be in the green phase. So, and I know that might potentially change as well. So thank you.
Mrs. Casper, to address your questions regarding where the sixth graders would be, the sixth graders would be at the middle school. And you are correct in your assumption that their schedule would mirror more of an elementary model to keep them in cohort groups as to the maximum extent possible. We do understand that it might not be able to be done 100% at the sixth grade level, but that is the plan for them to be at the middle school with the 7th and 8th graders, albeit in the green phase, the sixth graders would be in 5 days a week. And a lot of that is predicated on the medical consultants that we brought in, and the age of those students and the needs of those students from a standpoint of a family situation. We tried to factor in all of those different things in the planning of our environment. And I do know that class size at the elementary level has been questioned a couple of times, and I do want to share that our goal obviously is to get those numbers even lower than 22. And that's why we are sending out the questionnaire to our families to determine which families may choose the completely remote virtual option, and which are planning to bring their students back to school. That will help us further our planning and we will have firmer numbers to share with the board moving forward. Some of the challenges that exist with reducing class sizes have to do with hiring staff and having enough space in our buildings to add additional classrooms, which, as you well know from our feasibility study, it has become very difficult in our school district to add additional classes in our school, in our elementary schools, especially at places that are at 90% capacity. So with that, the adding of additional staff, hiring of additional staff, and trying to find space to place those additional staff members. Our hope is that the data that we receive will provide a much lower numbers in the event that our community chooses. If the initial survey is any indication of what the potential is for a virtual online, the survey that was sent out on June 22nd or 26th, one of those dates, approximately 25% had still not made up their mind as to whether or not they were going to keep their kids home. So in the event that that does occur, I think we're looking at much reduced numbers from the 22 that we are sharing with you as what is actually doable with the 6-foot social distance. It's not ideal. I agree with Dr. Kennedy and Mrs. Cocker and others that have focused on that. Obviously, we want our class sizes to be as small as possible, but we do have to be realistic in terms of our resource limitations and our budget moving forward. So I think more information will be coming on that particular item to the board for their review and consideration at upcoming meetings.
Thank you, Dr. Paley. Other board members?
Yeah. I know we've talked obviously a lot about the mask mandate. Are we going to be more specific in terms of what types of masks are allowed? For example, are we going to allow bandanas? Are we going to say that a mask has to loop behind the ear? What process has gone into that specifically?
Dr. Bailey?
We haven't according to the state, any of the ones that you have mentioned, Mr. McCray, is an acceptable face covering. In addition to those bandanas, the behind the ear masks, and there's also the ability, we have to answer Mrs. Casper's other question. Yes, we are prepared to provide personal protective equipment to students who may not have access to it. So we have ordered an abundance of additional face coverings. We have also ordered face shields for all of our teachers, and we would accept face shields for our staff and student population as well. We do realize that there are certain situations where some students in different environments may not be able to wear the actual cloth face covering. So maybe a face shield would be more appropriate in those students with special needs, etc. But one of the driving comments, as you heard from Dr. Trickett and Dr. Stout and Dr. Hoffert from our medical consultants, was the more that we have face shields, face coverings in place, the more we adhere to the guidance, the less chance that we're going to have a spread within our school system that could potentially shut us down from the state level and the Department of Health.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, we talk about enforcing wearing a mask. Are we going to enforce the mask has to be over the entire nose and mouth? Because otherwise, if you just have it over the mouth and not the nose, it defeats the purpose.
That is correct. We're going to be very specific and clear on what constitutes appropriate wearing of the face mask. That's why at the elementary level, when Dr. Stout talked about the phased approach with our youngest students, even into third grade, we teach our kids routines. We teach our kids the rules of school, and that phase, that staggered approach, allows those teaching to occur regarding what are the rules according to face masks. How do you line up in the hallway? How do you appropriately physically distance from your classmates when you're in a transition, if there is a transition to recess or another environment in the school? So the answer to your question is yes, we will be holding the line on our masks because our medical consultants have shared with us how important that is in the context of being back at school.
Now, I appreciate that. And obviously, as the parent of 2 students in the district, I appreciate all the work that's gone into the plan so far. We all know things are going to change as we move forward. I think most importantly, as has been said time and time again tonight, what you'll put in this plan is obviously flexibility and choice. And I think, again, as a parent, those are the 2 things that we can ask for the most at this time. So I do appreciate that. My last question comes regard to the different cohorts. Is there consideration being put into place that if we're going to do this cohort approach, that if we're going to have obviously X number of students on the same bus, are we then looked at keeping that cohort that's on the same bus in the same classroom and follow that through kind of throughout the system?
Dr. Bailey?
Yes, we're going to do our absolute best, Mr. McCray, to limit
maybe
the mixing of students. So as we develop those transportation routes, understanding that on a elementary bus there are different grade levels of students, but obviously if we have 5 first graders on a bus, we would work to schedule those 5 first graders in the same first grade classroom to the extent that we can. Also understanding that there may be some students with special needs that might not be able to be in that classroom environment. But yes, we are going to do everything we possibly can to limit the exposure that kids have to other kids within the confines of that day. The school district has a circle of control environment for everyone. I mean, certain students do very well in that environment, but school is a very social place where kids go and they want to be with their friends, and we're trying to meet those needs, but also meet the needs that exist regarding the CDC and the Department of Health and the rules the governor has thrust upon us. And it's been an extremely challenging process for us to try to meet everyone's needs. But you are absolutely correct. Flexibility and choice, and that flexibility and choice will continue in the coming weeks, so that by the time we get to the start of school, we have put our best forward for our kids and for our staff and for our parents.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members?
I believe Mr. Negrini is trying to comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Negrini.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First and foremost, I think there's going to be a number of questions from parents that we are unable to answer this evening. Many questions that perhaps we have thought through from an administrative standpoint that need to be communicated in more detail as this plan moves forward, and some of which parents will need time to digest those answers to their questions and concerns in order to make the right decision for their family, whether or not to send their children back under the plan that's being recommended by administration, or to choose to go the route of the Wilson Virtual Learning Academy. And I believe in one of our prior communications that there was some mention about making a commitment to either of those choices at a date that may be a little early for parents to ultimately have to be committed for what may be a trimester or a first marking period. I realize that pushing that date back a bit puts the district at a greater disadvantage to make the appropriate adjustments when it comes to either busing or to staffing or to classroom management. But in reality, we are talking about, you know, a number of families that are ultimately concerned about not only the health and safety of their children, but also about obtaining the best education that they can moving forward. There is no debate that what we had offered in an emergency basis in the spring is not what we have come to expect from the district as far as educating and preparing our students moving forward. And I'm confident that the district will put into place with this modified type of learning environment, a much more robust and more closely resembling high quality of education that I think our community is used to. But certainly, you know, I encourage all parents to read what the American Academy of Pediatrics has recently put out, and you know, in the end, the Academy strongly recommends that if it can be done safely, we get our students back into the buildings, that there is a tremendous benefit to them from both a learning and a social meaning that far outweighs the potential health risk if proper safety plans are put in place. And there can be no perfect plan put in place that is going to completely eliminate any risk. But using the Academy of Pediatrics as a backdrop to what is best for our children, I believe what is being rolled out by the administration addresses those needs of the students. We also have to remember that we are a place of employment for a large number of adults. And although we have a duty to make sure that our students are safe, we also have to balance out the fact that it has to be as safe of a working environment as possible. And that sometimes to suggest that one perhaps sacrifice for the other in terms of, you know, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask or some of these other quarantine protocols could in some ways put our employees at risk. And so I can assure you that none of us, you know, enjoy wearing the mask that is suggested by the CDC and other medical professionals. And I realize the difficulty of a 5 or a 6-year-old or you know, some other students, you know, with wearing a mask for several hours in a day. But we once again have a responsibility to our employees who may have in some ways compromised immune systems, or going home to family members that have compromised immune systems. So finding that proper balance is also important. So, my final point that I would make, and knowing that we do have the option that I think other districts don't have, in terms of making sure that if families choose to do the virtual learning academy, that they are receiving a Wilson curriculum, as opposed to making a decision to do some other cyber charter school that may, put them on a different track than what Wilson is putting them on in each and every grade. And that's what I think gives us the best opportunity for parents to make the most informed decision that they can. So I would just ask that the time frame upon which parents make this ultimate decision on whether to send their children back or not be delayed as long as possible, so that some of these questions, as and some of which I'm being texted questions right now by some other community members, is that for all of these questions to be answered as properly and accurately as possible, so that that difficult decision can be made, and can be made with the most information possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members before we open up to our public participation? And we will come back to this again before we vote. So just, if you have questions after you hear public participation, and again, before you vote, you will have another opportunity for that. Mrs. Carroll, or Mr. Fierling, would you be able to introduce the people that have called in for discussion?
Yes, first we have Mrs. Busher, who wants to talk about the school reopening.
If you are on the call, can you please use the raise hand feature? I don't see your name in the list currently. All right, she should be coming in here in a second. Go ahead.
So I just had a couple of things that I didn't see addressed, and maybe I just looked over them. One, so I have a student in high school and a student in elementary school. So our music lessons, as far as band, orchestra, and choral things, going to still happen and take place, whole group lessons, and then like the individual lessons for students. That was my first question. The second question is, it was addressed about modified start times, possibly having modified start and ending times. At what time would parents be given that information? And then my last one happens with the intruder drills and fire drills. How are those types of drills being addressed? Because in emergency situations, social distancing and things like that, in my opinion, as a parent and also as an educator, that shouldn't matter. I understand that we are trying to keep everyone safe, but obviously fire drills and intruder drills are also important in our society today. So how is all of that being addressed as well?
Great. Thank you. And again, we can't answer questions now, but those questions will be put together in a document to be shared with the parents. So thank you for bringing those forward. And if you have other ones, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Mrs. Carroll, our next caller.
Next, we have Mrs. Clark, and she wants to talk about virtual only and quarantine protocols.
Thank you.
You should be good.
Hey guys, it's me, the old lady with the baby. I just want to thank all the people that are parents on the board that spoke to both sides of the coin with your kids blowing up at home when they've been isolated at their desk all day, and all the things that go along with what it's like to be in an educational setting like the one being proposed. You guys did a great job, obviously, doing tons of research on best practices and listening to as many experts as you can find to chime in. My biggest concern is that it's not time to roll this out yet. I know you can't necessarily do what you want without the governor's support. But I am concerned for options and flexibility being offered to families, but not faculty and staff. You got a lot of teachers with children in your district, so that's a big concern for me because of my second issue, which is the quarantine protocols. In my current position, I'm a specials teacher, and the number of students that I see in a day is larger than a regular classroom teacher, as it would be for many specialist teachers in all of your buildings, particularly elementary, and the math just kind of gets out of hand. So if one student tests positive, God forbid, who quarantines? Their class, their teacher, all the other kids that their teacher taught, their siblings, their parents, the parents of their classmates. So it's pushing me off the deep end a little bit, and that's not anyone here's fault. I would just say that I really wish we could say, you know what, we hate virtual only because it doesn't allow us to do everything we want, but it's the least harmless thing that we can do next. I'd love to see like 90 days. Like we're going to reopen virtually. We're just going to put off our start rather than on again, off again. So I got lots more to say and commend you on your hard work and lots of other scenarios. But I think that's the crux of the issue for me, is that it feels like too much, too impractical, too soon. And I want our community to be the best it can be. And I'm okay putting that off. I don't feel like there's any educational ground that we'll lose that can't be made up. But this virus seems to be threatening enough that it's something that our community might not recover from. So thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Mrs. Carroll?
We have Mrs. Quick, and she wants to thank you during unprecedented times.
Mrs. Quick, go ahead.
Like I said in my message, I just honestly wanted to thank everyone for all that you're doing. I understand that this is very challenging, and all that you guys are doing is greatly appreciated. The teachers, the staff, everything. Thank you. That's all.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Mrs. Carroll?
We have Mrs. Sharma, and she wants to talk about e-learning versus in-person, and wants to know if she can opt for e-learning at the beginning of the school. Will they be allowed to shift to in-person later?
If you're here, can you use the raise hand? Because again, I don't see your name in the list. They may not be on.
Okay.
Let's skip to the next person, and if they pop on, we can come back.
Okay, we have Mr. Woolley. COVID-19 in kindergarten on safely reopening.
Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I have a prepared statement that I put together before your lovely presentation, so I'm just going to read it for posterity. My name is Graham Woolley, and my family lives in the Green Valley Elementary School District. Our oldest turned 5 this year, and he is looking forward to going to full-time school for the first time in his life. Kindergarten is supposed to be not just a chance to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also to provide an opportunity to form positive associations with teachers and classmates and the school system in general. My concern is not the quality of the education he'll be receiving, but rather the ability to effectively form a social bond with his teachers and his peers. Just to be clear, I am a trained scientist, and I'm fully on board with the CDC's and Governor Wolf's recommendations on mask wearing and social distancing. But I'm concerned that the mask policy will be inappropriate for younger children's social needs, as they need to see faces to engage in social bonding. Most other schools that are reopening that I've read about have a cutoff around like the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade for requiring masks. I'm not sure that 5-year-olds will benefit from wearing masks much, as the negatives could outweigh the positives. Some studies I've read show that kids under the age of 10 or so don't readily transmit the coronavirus to others, and it's unlikely that they will social distance correctly or have good mask discipline. I'm worried it'll sap the teachers' energy to constantly remind 5-year-olds to keep the masks on and keep their distance. As we all know, 5-year-olds are very selective listeners. I worry that mandatory mask wearing and social distancing could potentially make their first interaction with full-time school unnecessarily traumatic and give them the wrong idea about the necessity and value of full-time public schooling. Kindergarten is going to be our child's first exposure to an authority figure outside the comfort of our own home. And I feel it's important for his experience with school authorities to come from a place of love and community rather than fear and isolation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate all of you taking your time to call in today. Dr. Fadley,
yes,
hearing what board members have said and community that you've heard and questions you've received before the meeting, what recommendation do you want to put forth? Keep it as is? Did you hear anything that would change it? What would you like from us at this time? Go into a vote on the proposed?
I would like the board to vote on the proposed plan with the understanding that this plan is fluid, and we will be more than likely coming back to the board with additional requests for consideration in terms of maybe modifications moving forward. But I do think that our community needs to begin. They need to hear from us. They need to begin planning. They need to start consideration of what they may choose eventually in the future for their families. To Mr. Negrini's point, they're going to need some time to digest and ask their questions. And I will ask my senior level team to take the questions that were generated tonight and produce a document, a frequently asked question document that we can post on the website so everyone can see the answers to those questions. I would also like to say thank you to the over 200 individuals that are participating on YouTube during this meeting and listening to this presentation, and to the 180 plus individuals that joined via the Zoom link. That tells me that our community has some questions regarding the future of what we are going to do. And I think it's even more imperative moving forward that we continue to communicate on a regular basis with our entire Wilson community as things change. Obviously, we're going to need to collect some, what I'll call some soft data to help us plan moving forward. But I think at any point in time, our parents need to understand that their commitment is not their commitment until they're ready to make their commitment. And we can only ask for what people can share with us that they know. And if they don't know what they plan to do, they need to be able to say, I'm not decided yet. And we need to plan for that as well. We live and work in the servant community. We are servants to this community. We need to listen to this community. There's been a number of excellent points brought up by the board members. There's been a number of excellent questions asked by our community this evening that we need to continue to process. My commitment to the Wilson community is that we will continue to listen, and we will continue to do our absolute best in the environment that we have to work within to do what's right for kids and families, and to give that choice and flexibility that I think our community demands of us. And when we develop programs, the Wilson community expects us to be progressive. They expect a certain standard that we did not deliver in the emergency situation that we had last March. We did not deliver a comprehensive curriculum remotely. We are finalizing the details of that plan, and I can assure you that it is robust, and it is much different than what we had last spring. as we continue to finalize that plan. So again, a huge thank you to this board and to this community for their help and input throughout this process. It is much appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. We'll go to a vote in a minute. Again, we're, as you heard from Dr. Fadley, looking to approve the plan as presented, knowing that tomorrow it may change, and it may change August 25th because of the fluid situation that we're living in right now. These are unprecedented times. We learned from the spring, moving toward the fall. We want to keep everyone safe and healthy. And if we can look at this as a framework, like Mr. Schneider said, we need to start with something, because it doesn't make sense to keep going back to the drawing board every time a presentation isn't fully developed or ready to go. So if we can look at this as a board, as presenting the framework for administration to work with over the next several weeks, as things change from the government standpoint and the local standpoint, I think we just need to, again, make a nice, we need to do what we feel is right for the community, and recommendations from the superintendent and his team. So Mrs. Cocker, after this, real quick, does anyone have any questions before we go to the resolution? All right, Mrs. Cocker, could you read 2.1 for us, please?
Resolution 2.1, request approval of the resolution by the board attached that finds and declares that the COVID-19 pandemic is an emergency within the meaning of section 520.1 of the Pennsylvania School Code, and for the duration of said pandemic, the superintendent shall have the duty and the authority to develop a health and safety plan that ensures a minimum of 180 days of instruction, allowing for a minimum of 900 hours of instruction at the elementary level and 990 hours of instruction at the secondary level, employing any combination of in-person, virtual, and distance learning as the superintendent deems appropriate as attached.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Negrini put his hand up to motion, and
Mr. Negrini first.
Mr. Schneider will second.
Thank you. Mr. Negrini first, second for Mr. Schneider. Any discussion? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Carroll, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
No.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes,
7-4, 1 against.
thank you. Approval of the minutes from board meeting June 22nd, 2020 as attached. Do I have a motion?
First Casper.
Mrs. Casper first, second.
McCray, second.
Mr. McCray second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Martin, treasurer's report, please.
Mr. President, I submit for approval the Treasury report, investment report, and cap presented.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Martin. Do we have a second?
Negrini second.
Mr. Negrini second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Payment of bills. Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval of the general fund of bills $1,064.24. Construction fund $1,000,000 and
Mr. Martin, can you call back on your phone like you did last time? We're having a real hard time understanding what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me
It's
now?
still very slow and
Mute,
Well, I'll
mute
do
your,
my best again.
there you go. There you
Do
are.
my best.
mute the laptop again.
Oh, isn't it? I'm sorry. It should be.
Sorry.
It says mute.
It says mute.
There, I think I got it.
Okay.
Oh, that's better. Thank you.
Let me do this again here. I present, Mr. President, payment in the bills in the amount of $9,085,164.24 out of the general fund. And out of the 2019 construction fund, $1,491,087.76.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Financial reports, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight the following reports. These are all for June. The cafeteria report, child care, and the activity counts as follows. Southern Middle School, Wilson West Middle School, and the senior high.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Negrini, second.
Mr. Negrini, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Dr. Faley, the vote on what we discussed earlier, the plan of reopening is now, the first part was declaring the emergency state, the number of days and hours for students. So Dr. Faley, I'll turn it back over to you to make the recommendation for the reopening, and then any discussions that we as a board may have.
Thank you, President Hart. So my recommendation as superintendent of the Wilson School District that the Board of Directors approve the school reopening plan as has been presented this evening, with the understanding that there may be modifications made to the plan and brought back to the board for consideration at future board meetings.
Thank you. And again, as I said, we need to start with something. So thank you for the plan. And any questions from, first of all, we need a first motion.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, second, Mr. Negrini. Any discussion?
I'm going to vote yes because, as you said, it's going to be a set of guidelines. It's certainly not complete. And with the understanding that it will get more specific and more complete as it goes on, and that the board will approve each of those processes as we go through.
Thank you. Other board members, concerns, questions, comments?
Mrs. Cocker here. I just wanted to comment and commend the district and all of our administrators and everyone that put a lot of time into the plan that we see now. And I think the biggest bonus for our community is that it offers choice for families while staying within the Wilson framework. So although I may not agree with every aspect of the plan, as a board member, as a parent, I'm happy that I get to make the decision for my own children, what is best for them. And I feel like that is going to be mirrored in the feelings of the community members as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
No.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mr. Hart.
Yes.
7 for, 1 against.
Dr. Faded, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, President Hart. I present the superintendent's report with personnel and program recommendations for board consideration. I'd like to announce 2 retirements from the Wilson School District and recognize them for their service to the district. Mrs. Patricia Goods, Special Education Administrative Assistant at Southern and West, effective July 6, 2020, with 13 years of service to the Wilson School District. And Jill Rosem, Library Aide and Monitorial Aide at Cornwall Terrace, effective June 22nd of this year, with 33 years of service to the Wilson School District. I wish both of these individuals well in their next phase of life, and I thank them for their service to our students in the Wilson School District.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fadley. And 7.2 is something outside of the normal superintendent's report. So Mrs. Cocker, could you please read that resolution?
7.2, authorize the superintendent to discuss an unpaid leave 1 year for WEA members who do not qualify for FFCRA or FMLA due to a medical diagnosis. This would require an MOU and dialogue with the WEA union leadership. The WEA members will be required to buy into COBRA and fund their medical benefits. The district would not contribute the FICA or PSERS for the WEA member, and they would lose a year of service with PSERS.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve 7.2 to 7.9 as presented. Do I have a
Cocker.
motion? Mrs. Cocker first, second.
Kennedy.
Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8 for, 0 against.
Under 8.1, accept with gratitude the following donation from Patient First to Spring Ridge Elementary, a check for $1,000 to be used to purchase flex seating. 8.2, request to approve a stipend check in the amount of $400 from Allegheny IU to be used by the district to offset travel and substitute costs for a teacher participating in a 2-day computer science workshop. The stipend was from PA Smart Grant. Looking for a motion to approve 8.1 and 8.2.
Schneider motion.
Mr. Schneider first. Do you have a second?
Casper second.
Mrs. Casper second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Human Resources, 9.1. Request to approve the updated MOU between the Wilson School District and contracted / non-Act 93 administrators for salary freeze for the 2020-2021 school year as attached. 9.2. Request to approve the updated wording in the Act 93 administrators agreement to reflect the maximum number of vacation days to be accrued in 1 year, 35, as attached. 9.3. Request to approve revised job descriptions for administrative assistant to special education supervisor and special education secretary as attached. Looking for a motion to approve human resource items 9.1 through 9.3. Have a motion?
Cocker.
Mrs. Cocker first, second.
Negrini.
Mr. Negrini second. Any discussion? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Under Student Services, 10.1, request approval of the updated 2020-21 school calendar. New teacher orientation to be held August 12th and 13th. Teacher professional development to be held August 17th, the 21st, and the 25th. 10.2, request approval to contract with Devereaux Foundation ESY program for one special education student at a cost of $268.20 per day and a one-on-one services at a cost of $40 per hour beginning July 1st, 2020 until August 14th, 2020, pending solicitor review and approval. 10.3, request approval to contract with Bucksmont Academy to guarantee 2 special education slots at a cost of $144.67 per student per day for the 2020-2021 school year calendar, and 2 regular education students slots at a cost of $126.27 per student per day for the 2020-21 school year, pending solicitor review and approval. 10.4, request approval to contract with Antietam School District for one student to attend our ESY extended school year program at a total cost of $5,000 from June 29, 2020 through July 30th, 2020. 10.5, request approval to contract with Schuylkill Valley School District for one student to attend our ESY program at a total cost of $3,750 from June 30th, 2020 through July 30th, 2020. 10.6, request permission to contract with Capstone Academy for one special education student for 2020-21 school year services at a cost of $83,070 for the school year, beginning August 31st, 2020 and ending June 11th, 2021, pending solicitor review and approval. 10.7, request approval, a linkage letter between SAM, Services Access and Management, and the Wilson School District for 2020-21 school year, pending solicitor review and approval. 10.8, request permission to contract with New Story School for 2 special education students for the 2020-21 school year services at a cost of $380 per student per day, beginning August 25th, 2020 and ending June 4th, 2021, pending solicitor review and approval. 10.9, request permission to contract with Talk School for one special education student for the 2020-21 school year at a cost of $81,150 for the school year, beginning August 26th, 2020 and ending June 3rd, 2021. 10.10, request approval of a memo of understanding for a school nursing manager position as attached to be filled by a current member of the Wilson School District Certified School Nursing Staff at a stipend of $6,000 and replacing the current department chair model. 10.11, request approval of the settlement agreement and release to establish an educational fund in the amount of $25,000 for the benefit of a student's educational needs to settle and comprise all claims raised by the parents of a special education student, and to authorize the board president and secretary to execute the agreement on behalf of the district. 10.12, request approval of the addendum to settlement agreement for one special education student to extend the termination date of the transitional fund at an additional 6 months from July 1st, 2021 to January 1st, 2022. 10.13, request to ratify the memorandum of understanding with Tower Health as attached. 10.14, request approval of the 2020-21 resolution for graduation requirements and suspension of board policies as attached. After all of that, looking for approval from items 10.1 through 10.4 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Casper first.
Mrs. Casper first, second.
Kennedy.
Dr. Kennedy second. Any discussion?
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, sure.
Why there is the difference in costs for the ESY students between Schuylkill Valley and Antietam School District? If that could be answered, please.
Dr.
Okay,
Hoffert, can you take that question, please?
Sure, that's actually income that we're receiving from those districts, and that's based on a per diem of the negotiated contract that we have with each of those districts for those students that have specific needs in those areas. So it's a little bit different based on the type of class that they're attending within our ESY program.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, it's not simply just a flat rate that if the needs of one student are greater than the needs of another, that's why the difference is in the cost.
Correct. And without looking at the IEP, one student could
Sure.
be attending for more days a week than the other. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
No.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
That's 7 for and 1 against.
Under technology and media, 11.1, request to approve to sell outdated desktop computers to Synchromore International sale price contingent upon individual device condition and specifications. 11.2, request approval to dispose of and recycle broken technology equipment with iGreen Electronics Recycling from Reading, Pennsylvania. 11.3, request approval of a new lease agreement for multi-function copiers, 60-month lease from Stratix Systems, Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, for 21 multi-function copiers to replace existing leases at mobile schools for $1,812 a month. 11.4, request approval of the new lease agreement for multi-function copiers, 60-month lease from Edwards Business Systems, West Reading, 11 multi-function copiers to replace expiring leases at multiple schools for $1,197.09. Looking for a motion to approve items 11.1 through 11.4. Do I have a first?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider first. Second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray second. Any discussion? Questions? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8 for, 0 against.
Under operations, 12.1, request approval to purchase ground equipment totaling $20,396.80 from Evelyn Service Plus as attached to be paid from the 2019 A bond. 12.2, request approval to purchase COVID-19 supplies totaling $166,670.88 as attached to be paid from the COVID-19 Safety and Security Grant. Looking for a motion to approve items 12.1 and 12.2. First,
Negrini first.
Mr. Negrini first. Is there a second?
McCray second.
Mr. McCray second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8 for, 0 against.
Under finance, 13.1, request to approve Sarah Ginn, Food Service Director, as an authorized signer on the food service checking account. 13.2, request to approve Daniel Weber, Principal, as an authorized signer on the high school student activities checking account. And 13.3, request approval of the budget transfers dated June 18, 2020 through July 15, 2020. And 13.4, request approval to submit 4 delinquent accounts to Berks County Tax Claim Bureau. Looking for a motion to approve 13.1 through 13.4 as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Martin first,
Negrini
Schneider
second.
second.
Mr. Negrini second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Under food and cafeteria, 14.1, request approval of the bid awards for the 2020-21 school year. 14.2, request approval for the attached wellness policy assessment. This assessment measures how the district is compliant with the local school wellness policy, the extent to which the wellness policy complies with the model local school wellness policies, and the progress made in achieving the goals of the wellness policy. Looking for approval of 14.1, 14.2.
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider first. Is there a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Under extracurricular, request approval of the updated athletics and extracurricular health and safety plan as attached. Do I have a motion?
Cocker.
Mrs. Cocker first. Do we have a second?
Kennedy.
Martin.
Dr. Kennedy. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. Negrini,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
8-4, 0 against.
Under miscellaneous, it's just the enrollment report. Enrollment of the last day of school, May 29, 2020, was 6,240 students, which reflects no change from the previous report on May 15, 2020. Committee reports. First, Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Casper.
Yes. So it seems like a long time ago that we met. We met back June 24th via a hybrid format. So part of it was via Zoom, and part of the committee members were at the West Campus. Dr. Kraft and Mr. Reedy, BCTC, hosted a tour at the beginning around 5:30, and they showed the new welding facility at the West Campus. We also discussed plans to advertise the sale of the new student-built house, which was appraised at $350,000 and was featured that same week in the Reading Eagle. I thought it was really amazing, all the work that the students did and put in to making that home really, really beautiful. I mean, just like, professionally done. I just hope that perhaps in the future, we could give the students a little more credit for the work that they put in to that particular project. Not much more to report. I did, just a point of interest, I thought it was really commendable on the part of the administration at BCTC and our BCIU to drop William Carl Jr. from the JOC board and swiftly planned for the approval of a resolution to support anti-racism and social justice in our schools. I know many other districts kind of lagged behind in putting out statements and things like that, and I thought it was very commendable on the part of BCTC, which represents the majority of our districts in the county, and of course with the support of BCIU to put out a statement right away. Otherwise, not much more to report. Our next meeting is scheduled for, we're doing a earlier than usual because we have to approve a plan, like everybody else is. We're meeting on August 5th via another hybrid format. So part of it will be Zoom, and the other members have a choice of meeting at the East Campus this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Curriculum Committee and Berks County BCIU, Dr. Kennedy.
Neither the curriculum committee nor the BCIU has had a meeting since our last board meeting, so no reports.
Thank you. Berks EIT, Mrs. Schlossman.
We have not met, but we will be meeting on July 30th.
Thank you. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
Yes, so we had our last extracurricular meeting on Monday, July 13th. We have many sports that are currently for the high school and I think a few middle school that are currently on voluntary practicing or clinics during the summer and are all following CDC guidelines when it comes to sports in regards to masks. And coaches wearing masks and students wearing masks when not actively participating in the sport. So I just want to encourage everyone to continue to do so because if we do that now, then there's a better chance that we'll be able to continue to participate in sports in the fall. So I just wanted to congratulate or thank the coaches that are making sure that their students continue to do this, and I'm glad that people are able to be active and safe at the same time.
Thank you. Facilities report, Mr. Negrini.
No report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Martin.
No report.
Human Resources, no report. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Yes, there's
Interesting.
an interesting.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
No, try it again.
Okay, I'm
That's
going
better.
to go in my other room now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The Senate proposed 2 constitutional amendments, which do not have to have the governor's signature. Basically, these 2 proposed constitutional amendments will have to be voted on by the voters of Pennsylvania, as well as in 2 consecutive sessions with the legislators. The bills are proposed are to limit the governor's ability in the future to declare emergency procedures for more than 21 days. The second one is more of a form process of electing appellate court justices, which will divide the Supreme Court and the Superior Court into 2 judicial districts to give a broader range to all folks versus just selected areas. So these are going to be interesting, especially the Senate Bill 1166, to see if it makes it to referendum. That's it.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mr. Troutman.
Thank you. Just a comment. I mean, obviously tonight we talked a lot about communications and the value and the need for constant and consistent communications over the next few weeks, actually probably over the next year. So I just want to let you know that obviously I'm committed to utilizing all of our district communications channels to ensure that we are keeping our community and our staff informed of everything that's going on as it relates to the reopening of school. So now that the plan was passed tonight, we will be sending a communication out tomorrow to our community as well as our staff. It'll be a comprehensive communication that will include actually a video that will kind of give a high-level overview of the plan. It will also include a link to the video of the presentation, the full presentation that was given tonight. It will have a link to the full health and safety plan, as well as a one-page overview of the plan that's really more of a graphical representation, so it's easier for people to kind of comprehend all the details of the plan. We're also developing a web page that will contain all of the communication that's going to go out, obviously, over the next weeks, months, school year, as it relates to our reopening and our anything that's going on as it relates to our health and safety plan. So again, for the community, be on the lookout for those communications tomorrow. We'll also be sending out a staff communication. And then the other piece, I just want to reiterate that there will be a follow-up communication going out in the form of the questionnaire that we've been discussing tonight. Again, that will go out to all district families, and we'll asking them to provide their input regarding their plans for the upcoming school year in-person instruction, as well as more details about our virtual options. So we're working on some materials that we can send out to families so they can have more concrete information about the virtual options. So to Mr. Negrini's point, they have some more details that they can utilize to just be better informed to make those types of decisions. Because again, those are going to be good data points for us to have as we move forward. So just again, to the community, keep your eyes open for those communications to be coming out over the next few days. And again, we just want to reiterate just how much we appreciate being part of this community and just the support that we continue to get from the community of the Wilson School District. It's just a privilege to serve here. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there an Education Foundation report? Mr. Case is not here tonight.
I am not aware of one. I did not receive one from Mrs. Mack.
Okay, thank you. Technology, Mr. Schneider.
Sorry. We did not meet this month, so I have nothing to report.
Okay. Mr. Maravich. Mr. Maravich.
Sorry, I lost all the visuals.
That's okay.
Yeah, I do not have a report. I think Mike commented on a couple of constitutional changes. The one would be the judges would be selected differently. It wouldn't be just concentrated in Allegheny and Philadelphia. There was a kind of an amendment in addition to the LRTA tax concepts. So we might be hearing that from some of our local municipalities. That's been amended and modified to allow for some additional tax incentives for upgrading properties. But other than that, no report.
Thank you. We do have one participation on non-agenda items. Mrs. Carroll.
Have Mrs. Rowley about, she wants to speak about IEPs.
Okay, Mrs. Rowley, go ahead.
Mrs. Rowley, if you're there, can you do the raise hand? I'm not seeing her on the call, so I don't know.
All right, thank you. And before we adjourn, I just want to say thank you to everyone for the flexibility and the dedication getting us from March when things were first happening through today, and the dedication it'll take from all of us to the start of school and through the school year. I thank everyone and appreciate all the hard work and dedication from everyone, and thank you. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Hart,
Yes,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to say one thing. We have two Wilson families that are going through big struggles, both at the same time. We have a family in Green Valley of one of our future Green Valley students, current Berkshire Heights students, that has a brain tumor. And we also have a Whitfield student, a rising second grader, who is in brain surgery as we speak. And I just I'd like to send out thoughts and prayers and good vibes to those families and let them know that as a district, we are thinking about them and wishing them well.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Any other comments before we close? Looking for a motion to adjourn.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, second.
Negrini.
Mr. Negrini. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.